Contraction and Convergence, this accounting system, is fundamentally musical in its structure. Music has structure, life has structure. The economy is taking us into what are increasingly chaotic conditions. The economy has taken us into a situation where itself it is already starting to explode. Tragically, it's taking the societies and much of the ecology with it. That process has to be arrested. Contraction and Convergence provides a way of accounting for all of this future consumption in such a way that, quote, quote, we all pull together rather than blow ourselves apart. The point is, the shared language is actually given by the structure of music itself, to play in tune and play in time together, and to draw on this incredible repertoire and history that we have of success in doing things together.
I think Aubrey is one of those singular characters that Britain throws up. In fact, it was South Africa threw him up, and we've been the bucket that's received him. And Aubrey, I think, is going to be seen as a huge cultural icon. I'm being serious. I think when the dust settles on this, people realize that tremendously important phrase that Mark Twain once memorably uttered, which is, it is said that reasonable men and women bend themselves to the ways of the world, which only goes to show it is the unreasonable that are the only ones capable of changing it. And there we have a marvelous, unreasonable man. We should salute people like him. We should build him in wax. We should make stone monuments to him. And for God's sake, don't let him talk to politicians because he'll kill them. The reason I think this film should be made is that not only will it be a film that is going to excite people and interest people and stimulate their intellects and hearts, but actually it will be a piece of history, the beginning of something that is going to change all our lives.
In order to solve this problem of climate change, we have to solve it faster than we create it. And this isn't going to happen by guesswork. And it isn't going to happen simply because people are increasingly panicky. It's going to happen because we have a rational, transparent agreement and know, rather the way orchestral musicians do, that we're all on the same hymn sheet playing the same piece of music. The argument that I and others have pursued for 20 years, Contraction and Convergence, basically builds everybody into the same account, where the critical difference is, it is not a market-based framework which doesn't know where it's going. It's a framework-based market which does. Contraction and Convergence is a global agreement to resolve climate change. Contraction refers to the future total of emissions of greenhouse gases from human society, which must be taken down to zero within 50 years. Convergence within that relates to achieving the equal per capita globally sharing of that event at a rate that can be negotiated. Subject to that C&C framework, a market for the entitlements to emit that is created thereby is possible. It's as simple as that. Equal rights subject to the limit that saves us.
We only have maybe 1 to 2 decades to really tackle emissions. If we hang on any longer than that, then what's going to be a bad situation is going to become completely catastrophic. And I feel that contraction and convergence is really the only mechanism we have available that can solve this problem in time.
Aubrey is the director of the Global Comics Institute.
Music is really where I began and conducted my life until I was 40. And you don't think about this, but it's fundamentally about time management. You have to measure space, but also time in respect of playing in tune and also playing in time. It inherently works because of its acute time dependency. The climate change problem so far has remained unaddressed in a realistic manner because primarily the policy that has been brought to bear on it is seen as economic. We have in effect what you can call the double jeopardy of climate change. It is the increasingly asymmetric global development where money and people go in two opposite directions. There are more and more poor people who are discards, while fewer and fewer people become more and more absurdly wealthy. It's a kind of global apartheid. We call this expansion and divergence. It grows on average at 3% per annum and has done for several decades, at least since the Second World War. The other problem, the other part of the double jeopardy, is the fact that the rate of damages caused by climate change against what the insurers called uninsured economic losses due to climate change is going at twice that rate. In other words, it's going at 6% per annum. Albeit from a lower base, it's only a matter of time before the rate of damages overwhelms the economy with all its asymmetries and makes all our future efforts completely irrelevant. I grew up in South Africa. I was a white kid on the white side of the tracks. The country's motto was unity is strength. The public policy was separate development, apartheid. And to a kid, that was adults all over. They just didn't add up. I studied music at school along with all the rest of the stuff, rugby and running around the mountains and so on. Went to university, continued it, and realized that I had a pretty straight choice at the end of university, which was either to pursue a music scholarship abroad or be sent to the border to shoot Africans. I took the route out and very glad that I did. Some years later I was living there and working there for a while, both as a player and as a composer, which I enjoyed tremendously. It's all about this time dependency, but not merely the enjoyment of, but the absolute celebration of creating things of beauty that are a function of understanding time dependency and how things fit together on paper and in practice. When I got to the UN in 1990, I realized it wasn't just apartheid, it was global apartheid, and that the coalition we needed to deal with this problem was going to have to be, in effect, a rainbow coalition of people coming from very different tangents, but together into the same understanding. So that directly led to contraction and convergence, but it's the product of being quite severely burned as a child by social circumstances which are clearly wrong and dysfunctional.
The link between this and campaigning on climate change is dead easy. You have to be really focused and determined to go on with both. So doing this helps the climate change campaign for contraction and convergence. It's not about thinking things through so much as being absolutely focused and determined to see things through.
The failure of the political system to deal with climate change so far is explained very simply by two things. The one is the tendency to blame somebody else for creating this problem, and the other, entirely related problem, is the absolute commitment to continued economic growth at virtually any cost, in spite of the fact that the emissions and the GDP, the gross domestic product, have been perfectly correlated for the last probably 100 years, but you can certainly demonstrate numbers for that for the last 50. So as soon as people and governments have realized that dealing with emissions was a potential threat to future growth, they tended to deprioritize dealing with emissions and to concentrate on protecting economic growth. I can also confess to a certain amount of bloody-mindedness. When you hear people confronting you with idiotic put-downs and rejections that simply don't add up, but defend vested interest in the status quo and the carefully crafted avoidance tactics of people who are doing very nicely out of this problem, it gets your goat, and it got mine. So in the course of marching this 20 years, it wasn't a question so much of speaking truth to power and being religious about it. It was assuming that, rather like playing the fiddle, the truth is the power. And if something's in the way of that, it's going to give way to that truth. And the only access to this truth that we've got is making as clearly as possible a rational and proportionate argument and asking everybody else if they've got something better and to demonstrate it if they have. Ultimately, what's important in this is that the plan, the C&C plan, emerges in a way which everybody can see, can understand and accept. And when the plan is clear, the man can get out the way. And I'm only too happy to do it, but then and not before.
I think that Aubrey Mayer has done an amazing job and has shown extraordinary persistence and ingenuity in working out a scheme of this kind, and I very much admire him for it. Above all, he's laid out a kind of intellectual and legal framework, which is what you need if you're going to set global arrangements in place. And these global arrangements should, I believe, be fully reflected in the bill that is now before Parliament to regulate climate change. It is not the time for half measures or quarter measures or fiddling with the problem. It's important to lay out the principles and then see how they should best be interpreted to give effect to a common human problem.
When we proceed from the global target to the UK target, we are suggesting something which is reasonably pragmatically close to contract and converge. And I think it's important to realise that actually, although people get very worked up about precise methodologies, contract and converge or other variants or triptychs, etc., it's very difficult to imagine a long-term path for the world which isn't somewhat related to a contract and converge type approach.
But what I don't understand, if that's the case, and if what you're doing is more or less contraction and convergence, given the scale of the need for education and for the whole planet really to understand the scale of the challenge, wouldn't it just make sense for you to come out publicly and actually endorse it properly?
Well, I think...
Or have you just done so in your reply?
No, I think we have really. I mean, I think we have. I mean, we didn't call it contract and converge, apart from anything else. I mean, for some reason which I don't quite understand, this has ended up slightly emotive sense to one, and it's also... It gets interpreted in particular ways. But I think we have made a very clear statement that we cannot imagine a global deal which is both doable and fair, which doesn't end up by mid-century with roughly equal rights per capita to emit. And that is clearly said in the report.
Well, so can I just so if Aubrey Mayer were producing a sequel to the book that he's already written, would he have something written by you on the back page endorsing contraction and convergence?
I think if Aubrey Mayer read the words that I've said, he'd be willing to put those on the back of his book because they're pretty strong support in principle for what he's saying.
I think Aubrey is a good gentleman because he has really been on this issue for years, donkey years, and he's not giving up. And he has the stamina. I think if we were all of us like Aubrey, we would have achieved very high levels. Unfortunately, not many of us have been that strong.